Yeah, I'm with you, but at the same time, I do think those players need to be replaced, and that's where I brought this up on your
Yeah.
show, I think, a couple weeks ago, and I'm bringing it up again, Krug. I think people are going to be shocked, but I think a month from now, the conversation is going to be very defensive line heavy with the 49ers. They built this team from 2017 on with defensive line in mind, building the deepest, nastiest defensive line in the NFL. I think last year was the first year in a little while that we had a completely underperforming defensive lining. I understand that they played well in the Super Bowl, but I think they missed, like you said from the beginning, they missed quality depth and quality signings that they had, like the Samson Ebukams, the Charles Amenahues, the Arden Keys, those type of high effort players who still were playing for their second contract. I think that they're going to have to go back and rebuild the depth of this defensive line, especially given that we look at Bosa, right? That's superstar. I think Armstead kind of stays on. His contract makes him kind of a stuck piece. He's a good player, though he's been getting hurt the last couple of years. Javon Hargrave, let's say he was banged up this year and maybe you get full money's worth next year. You didn't get that this year. After that, like, do you know that you can rely on Drake Jackson and look at him as a starter? I don't think you could say that. Robert Beal had a couple of nice rushes in the Super Bowl, but I don't know that anybody knew he was wearing 51 before he stepped on the field for the Super Bowl. And if you didn't look it up during the game, you're lying to me right now, because I'm sure that you saw who the hell is 51 playing for the 49ers. I've seen this team the entire year. I haven't seen 51 on the field. So that's kind of the situation they're at. So I think we're going to be looking at defensive linemen. I think they got to build the depth up again. I think they need to draft multiple defensive linemen again.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no question. You know, it's so funny too, because the 49ers badly need a right tackle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet every single time, and I've made jokes about this, that they'll talk right tackle and they'll acknowledge all throughout the year they need a right tackle. And then we get into draft season, and by the time it gets to draft day, their offensive tackle becomes a defensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And their offensive line need gets, sandwiched behind their defensive line need. And the more I look at it again now, I mean, I was doing a mock draft the other day and I went through my mock draft and I had the 49ers going D-line like 3 picks in a row, and then going offensive line. Now I like some of the offensive linemen a little bit further back. If they picked in the top 15,
you know
maybe,
what the issue is though, Krug? You know what the issue is? I'll tell you what the issue is. Because when you're talking about a value-driven team like the 49ers, the way offensive linemen are coming into the NFL and the way defensive linemen are coming into the NFL, you're always going to feel like you're going to find a defensive lineman that's way better than where you are at the draft, because there's so many of them and they're going based on different teams' needs. And you're always going to feel like that offensive lineman that you're taking, you're reaching at that spot, because everybody starts reaching for the offensive lineman because there's not that many good ones in the draft. And when you're talking about a team like the 49ers that's so obsessed with the paper value, which they are, even with the draft, right? They love trading down a pick to draft Solomon Thomas and getting extra assets from Mitchell Trubisky and all of that. Well, Solomon Thomas can't play either. You didn't really win that trade, but you kind of won that trade because Mitchell Trubisky can't really play. So for a team that's obsessed with that, I think that's why they always end up at the defensive lineman. Because when you look at your draft board, that offensive lineman always feels like, damn, we're reaching for this guy at this spot. Whereas the defensive lineman, like Drake Jackson, right? They said they couldn't believe he was there at 64. Well, like 7 defensive linemen went before Drake Jackson at 64.
No, it's true. And it's kind of reminds me of playing fantasy football. It's like, if you don't have a high pick, but you want to get a running back, and then all of a sudden you look up and you're like, well, wait a second. Do I want the 7th best running back? I mean, I'm just looking at the offensive tackles in the draft. I'd love to have Joe Alt or the Penn State kid Fashanu. I would love to have J.C. Latham or Taliesin Fuaga. Coach is really hot to trot on Amarius Mims. I'd love to have him. Jesse's really hot to trot on Jordan Morgan. I wouldn't mind having Jordan Morgan. I talked to Trent Williams about Tyler Guyton because he's an Oklahoma kid, and obviously Trent went there. And Trent loves Tyler Guyton, and he knew all about him. And yet I'm looking at the master big board, and those guys are all gone by pick 28, and the Niners pick 31. So do you want the 8th best offensive tackle, Kingsley Sumatea, who I do love, Do you want Patrick Paul? Do you want the kid from Yale? Do you want Blake Fisher from Notre Dame? I mean, those are the guys that are projected to go, let's say, outside of the top 30, but inside the top, let's say, 115 picks. So it's like if you're going to go offensive tackle in round 1, you may have to reach for one of those guys. I'm looking at this big board, and I've studied the offensive tackles a little bit this year because I kind of knew the Niners were going in this direction. I love Javon Foster from Missouri. He's listed at pick number 122. So, I mean, that's a 4th-round pick or late 3rd. Christian Jones from Texas looked good in the Senior Bowl. He's pick 146. I really love him. I think he's terrific. But, you know, that's a late 3rd, 4th-round pick. Ladarius Henderson from Michigan, who played for Harbaugh, wore 73 for the Wolverines. You know, Arizona State transfer. He's pick 150. Julian Pearl from Illinois, really like him. He's pick 165. And then down the list, I really love Garrett Greenfield from South Dakota State. He's picked 244. Caden Wallace from Penn State picked 276. So I'm just saying.
But realistically, Krug, if we're talking about a starting right tackle for the 49ers, we're probably talking about a guy you're taking in the top 40 picks, right? You're not expecting if you get a guy that starts, especially at right tackle from day one, outside of the top 50 picks, you got to feel like you robbed a bank, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
Ideally, before that doesn't make sense. And that's where, like, for example, at this time last year, think about, did you look at Anton Harrison, right? Anton Harrison went 27. Did you look at Anton Harrison? Oklahoma tackle, exactly. Now, Anton Harrison ended up testing through the process and has 1st-round traits, right? Trent Baalke, I think, took him. He's 20 years old, and he took Anthony Davis, similar in terms of just traits and 20-year-old up from Rutgers in the top 15. So it's a Trent Baalke pick. But did you look at Anton Harrison and think, for sure, God damn it, that's a 1st-round tackle at this point last year? Probably not. You could probably convince yourself as you go through the process and you realize he's the last tackle on the board and he's talented enough to fill the threshold of becoming a starting tackle. But I think that's the tough situation with that position, especially if you're drafting 31. Because if you're like, for example, when Kyle Shanahan picked Trent Williams, if you're pick 4, right, and the 3 Oklahoma guys go before him, or the 2 Oklahoma guys and Sue, and you're left with the 3rd generational guy in the draft, right? McCoy, Sue, it was Bradford, Sue, McCoy, then Trent Williams. It's easy to pick the tackle. Like, that's the easiest pick in the world, and that guy has every trait. When you're stuck trying to get a guy at 31, it becomes really, really difficult. Maybe you pull a Joe Staley off, but you're most likely reaching for a player that you're not 100% looking at as a 1st-round pick, but he's the next best tackle available. That's what happened to the Niners with McGlinchey, right? I think all things considered, if you stack up the 2018 draft, nobody would look at Mike McGlinchey as the 9th best player in that draft, even before that draft. Even people were high on Mike McGlinchey. And I thought Mike McGlinchey was a good player at Notre Dame, but nobody thought of him as the 9th best player in the draft. No. When you realize only him and Colton Miller are probably the 2 eligible tackles that can go in the 1st round, and you realize, like, holy crap, like, if you don't take tackle here and you try to get a tackle elsewhere, all of a sudden at the 9th overall pick, Mike McGlinchey becomes great value. And I think that's what happens with the offensive tackle position. And honestly, Krug, that's why I'm very skeptical about them addressing it. I think a lot of fans are going to be upset with the way the offensive line gets addressed this offseason. I think in years past, we've talked about the corner position with the 49ers and then been shocked when they don't draft a corner. I think the offensive line position has done the same thing in years past, and I think it's going to do it again because I think they're going to look at their team and they're going to look at what's available and what's possible for them to get, and they're going to look at it and think it's not much of an upgrade.
No, I know. I mean, like, it makes me wonder, should maybe they go after like Trent Brown, you know, and try to do it. They traded him. But he, in a lot of ways, might be exactly what they need. I'm just looking, you know, theoretically, let's just say the board falls the way I've kind of laid it out there. And you're looking at, you know, the kid from Yale, or, you know, who's didn't even play this year. I mean, he's been hurt all year. He's got a quad tear, and I don't think he's going to work out in Indy. You know, a lot of people view him as kind of a little bit of a projection, like he might be great in 3 years, but he also might not be anything. Would you rather go with kind of the highest rated offensive tackle, or you're going to be staring you're right down, the way the draft looks from all the mocks that I've looked at, and I've looked at several, you're going to be staring at Darius Robinson from Missouri, who won the Practice Player of the Week award in Mobile, 6'5", 286-pound defensive end, and that's a little bigger than your typical Niner defensive end. But if you watch Robinson, he's freaky. Then there's Chris Jenkins from Michigan, Michael Hall from Ohio State. I mean, all three of those guys are kind of right there, end of the first round, anywhere mid to the mid-second round. I like Rook Ororo from Clemson. He's a tackle. I guess the question is this, Vish. If you were going to go D-line over O-line, what kind of D-lineman do you want? Because you have Hargrave, you have Armstead, you have Bosa. Are you looking for an edge rusher? Are you looking for a defensive end? Are you looking for an impact tackle because Armstead's old and Hargrave, quite frankly, wasn't all that great this year? That's the other question, because I don't know that I see, like, if I just go to the edge rush class and say, okay, take a look at the edge rushers, Dallas Turner's going high. Jared Verse from Florida State's going in round 1.
Yeah,
Latu from UCLA, top 20 pick. And then when you get down to that next group, Braylon Trice from Washington, Chop Robinson from Penn State is a workout freak, but I don't love him. I don't love Chop. Braswell, I do like from Alabama.
Penn State rushing the passer every year, isn't there?
I mean, I kind of like the other guy, Adisa Isaac. He's the redshirt junior who's 6'5", 250. Chop Robinson, though, according to the people and what I've been reading and about him, he is, like working out and doing crazy stuff in that. Like later this week in Indy, we're going to be talking about Chop Robinson because of the workout that he's about to put on the deal. And then there's smaller guys.
He outworks out. I haven't watched enough of him, but let me just ask you this: do you think he outworks out Jason Owe or Odafe Owe from Penn State?
Maybe.
Years
I mean,
ago?
You think
yeah,
it's sounding like he is going to. But I kind of like Chris Braswell from Bama. I'll tell you, the guy whose film I love is Jonah Ellis from Utah, who's, but he's 245 pounds. He's 6'2", 245. Is that too small for a 49er defensive end? My favorite defensive ends in this draft that are rushers would be probably Jonah Ellis, and I kind of like Muhammad Kamara from Colorado State. But Muhammad Kamara is 6'1", 250 pounds. I mean, I like some other guys later, Javon Solomon, Yabioki Onoma, Miles Cole from Texas Tech. I mean, there's other guys that I like further down the list that will be Sundiata Anderson from Grambling. I really like. There's some guys who are later. Richard Jubinor from Troy, late. I don't know if I love these guys. Yeah, I don't know if I love any of them. You know what I mean?
This is like, hey, I tell you, Krug, look, I didn't do the homework. Okay, take it on easy before I come to math class. And you are asking me the area under the curve for a spear. You're asking me the integral. I don't even remember any of this stuff.
I know, and I know you haven't done your homework on these guys, but I guess just theoretically, would you rather take, if you're going to go D-line over O-line, does it have to be an edge? Or could it be a tackle? Could you be happy taking a tackle at 31, Vish?
Like a defensive tackle.
A defensive tackle instead of an offensive lineman. And let's just say, forget guard, an offensive tackle. It's offensive tackle, defensive end, defensive tackle. I think that's the three positions, maybe corner, but I really think those three are going to be what they're kind of picking from. And I think most people say, go get the offensive tackle. But I would say go get the best player. And I love that Lynch said today, basically, hey, we want great players. So that kind of like, because he was asked best player available or position of need. And he said, guys that fit our culture, but we want great players.
Yeah, I agree. So I think you nailed exactly what I agree with. I think all three of those positions are very addressable and are very big needs. I think the offensive tackle is being talked about the most, but I think the other two positions are every bit as big needs for the 49ers. I'm with you in terms of what you said also in terms of the best player available. I think that's who they should take between the position. I don't think they should be stuck on the position. Again, I'm late on the draft. I'm going to watch the combine this week. I'm going to enjoy that, and then I'll start getting into the draft, and then maybe we can have some more player-to-player conversations. But right now, if you ask me and said, okay, why would I go with the offensive tackle of the three positions? It's because they got to look at the offensive tackle and say that guy has starting traits. It can't just be a guy that you think that can be start. It has to be a guy that, hey, when we put on the workout, and I don't mean this to say, oh, he kills the combine. I'm talking about when you look at his physical, tangible traits, you look at that guy and say he can be a starting right tackle, and possibly because we're investing a first-round pick with him, he has the ability to become our left tackle of the future. I'm not saying you have to put that pressure on him, but you need, like, Krug, you know the traits that you need to have to be a starting left tackle in the NFL. There's a reason all those guys get drafted in the top 15 picks, right? It's tough to find big guys that move like that can also anchor like that. It's a very rare combination. In terms of defensive tackle, I think they need to get younger at the position. I don't think they need just depth because I'm pretty unhappy with the 230-plus-year-old duo of Armstead and Hargrave. I'm unhappy because I feel like Armstead is at a point where his body is starting to wear out. He's older. I think he's getting injured more just because he's played a lot of football, and he's still a really good player. I think they're over-relying on him right now, and I think that's an issue. And then Hargrave, maybe he was hurt this year. It's tough for me to know, but he also was not very good for a large portion of this year. From the beginning of this year, especially their 3-week losing stretch, he struggled. I don't know how much you can really rely on him, especially when you talk about a guy getting paid and then he regressed. It's tough for me to imagine him bouncing back if I'm being realistic. I would hope he does, but I don't know if you can expect it. So I think a defensive tackle, whether it's a bigger guy who can really, get in the gaps and stop the run, or even an interior pass rusher, I think both would be welcome because I'm not 100% sure of the 49ers situation there. And then finally, edge player. Don't they always need a guy on the other side of Nick Bosa? Wasn't Drake Jackson supposed to be that? Are we really sure if he can be that? That makes that a need again. If you can find a guy at 31 that's got those kinds of traits like D Ford, this is around the realm where he went in his draft. Now, he had a knee issue that really pushed him down the boards when he was coming out, but this is just an example of what I'm saying. A high traits pass rusher, a guy with that elite bend, that elite burst, something you don't really find outside of the first round. If you can find that, I'd say go get it. So it would come down to the best player, but I think all three positions, even though one's only being talked about, I think all three positions are actually very important for this team. And I think those are the three positions that are going to make or break how good they are next year, because that's where they need to replenish talent.
No question. I agree literally with everything you just said there.